Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Prospero.Ai stock market live stream. Wow, what a day we're having in the markets, huh? The markets are down across the board. We had Tesla and Google earnings yesterday, plus Visa as well. That looks like they could have spooked the markets. We're going to be diving into what was the change after those reports came out last night and what we're seeing in the markets today. Uh, let's get a live look at where we are across the board. QQQ down 3 1/3%. The SPY down over 2%, which it's kind of funny. We mentioned last week how there was a crazy stat where the SPY hadn't finished down over 2% in over 350 trading days, which was the longest since 2007. Looks like that might be coming to an end today. 1 hour left of trading. We'll see how the day closes. Dow Jones down 1%, and the IWM down 1.5%. So the Dow, the leader right now, and the QQQ just getting nuked. I'll take you through some of the topics that we're going to be getting into today. As always, if you find these streams helpful to you and you're investing, like up the streams. Let's try to get to double digits today on this gloomy day in the markets. So we're going to do a deep dive, longer than usual, into everything that we're seeing happen in the markets today. So we're going to react to the earnings, the tech pullback, Tesla, Google, and Visa. If a fundamental change has occurred in the market, or if this is an overreaction. One important stat, if you look at technicals as part of your trading, is the QQQ crossed below its 50-day moving average for the first time in some time now. So we'll discuss if that's important or what that means in that technical signal. I see a comment for those of us betting on tech longs: is now the time to just cut our losses and wait for volatility to subside? We'll be sure to answer that, Saucepat, when George gets in here. I think that's a very good question, and that's probably on the top of everybody who's watching this stream's lives. As we know, AI and tech has been the driver for the market's performance so far this year. So I think that's a very key question to ask. So I can't wait to hear what George says and the answer to that. Also, another topic we'll get to today is the seasonal weakness that this time of year typically has in the markets. So between the middle of July and September is typically the weakest period for the markets in its historical performance. We'll discuss if that could be playing a role into what we're seeing in the markets now, and also why do we see that typical weakness in the markets for this time of the year. And then spinning from that, I think a lot of the questions I have today are kind of along the lines of what you're thinking, Saucepot. When I asked George, what are the areas of the market that are safe if we are seeing a significant change coming up in the market? And are we going to still see a market rotation? I know a lot of people have been bringing up the fact that IWM has been outperforming the NASDAQ and SPY over the last 2 weeks now, I believe. So could we continue seeing that? And then a stock that we've talked about, we've been asked about, and was in Prospero Signals as one of the favorites for, I don't think it's been there for a bit now, but it was earlier this year, it was in the top for a while. Celsius has now dropped over 50% from peak to trough. The stock split, so that could be playing a role in the fact that it's dropping. But is it time to buy that falling knife, or is it just time to stay away longer? I'll pose that to George. And also, I think spinning off that topic, probably ask if you're a long-term investor, is now the time to get greedy, when everybody's fearful, kind of the Warren Buffett mentality in the markets when everything's going down, kind of look for some buying opportunities there. Hello, George. Tough day in the markets we're having, huh?
Absolutely. One of those just like awful days
Yep.
where, even the shorts I picked, one of them went in the wrong direction on me. So it's just one of those that you just do your best and don't let it get to you too much.
Yeah. Yeah, and I got two more topics I'll tell the chat before we dive in headfirst into everything we're seeing in the market today. Just such a crazy day. One of them being, if we continue to see the market kind of show weakness like it has been in the recent week, and if that continues in the future, is that going to put pressure on the Fed to cut rates, and how is that going to affect the Fed's rate cutting path uh, going forward? And then I figured, I feel like a lot of this stream is going to be a little bit gloomy. We're going to talk a lot about bearish topics, so we might as well finish the stream on a positive note. If you guys are familiar with Tom Lee, he's on a lot of the networks. He's a perma bull, but he's been right. Obviously, the market's gone up a lot in the past few years. He predicted Nvidia's revenues to go to an insane amount by the end of the decade. So I'll let you know how much he said, and we'll end the stream on a positive note, hopefully. And maybe the markets will turn around while we're talking. Who knows? I don't think so, but you never know. So George, I think a lot of the stream today is just going to be diving into headfirst of everything that we're seeing in the market right now. We haven't had a day. It's funny, we mentioned that stat about the SPY last week, how it hadn't dropped over 2% in 350 trading sessions, and currently it is down 2.12% today. So looks like we might finally break that streak. We got the earnings last night that kind of seemed like they could have triggered what we're seeing today. What's your thoughts on the action we're seeing in the market so far?
I am just making one move, and then I'm with you. It's one of those days that this is not on our list of topics, but I should talk about how the one thing I'm really doing is something that I never really do, which is bet on Bitcoin derived stocks. But first, let's get to the listed topics.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't know. I feel like we might have to talk about that. That's a big
Oh, I
change.
mean, I had your question fresh in my mind. Yeah. So, I mean, pretty much what I'm doing here is, what I always advise people to do is, go with your conviction. And to me, it's hard to build conviction here because it looked like there was a rotation. Then there are these news events, CrowdStrike, what Trump said that really moved the market. Then we kind of had one day this week where um, small caps were leading again, another where they were trailing. And so it's just like all over the place. And today didn't really help. I mean, especially because, I can weave in your question, especially because Google's earnings weren't that bad. And especially to see Meta get hit so hard, off of those earnings when they kind of have, different build, like, basically the only disappointing thing about Google's earnings was YouTube revenues were a little bit under. But that need, to generate a response like that, it's very weird. But anyway, so what do I always look to do? I look to build patterns, and it's always smart to do that, right? What do I know factually about this market? I know factually that people respond to Donald Trump very powerfully in this market, and that can move the market. Whatever he says, whatever direction he's saying, that's it, right? He's speaking at a major Bitcoin conference tomorrow. So that's one part of it where I say, A, he's speaking here. B, we've seen him move the market a lot. And then C, like he's at that conference to, maybe he cares about Bitcoin. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on whether he does or not. But I know he definitely views it as a way to, make progress with younger voters. And so I would have a hard time seeing him show up and say things about Bitcoin that didn't get people excited. Now, I'm not going to bet purely on that. Coinbase is also at 100 in net option sentiment. Another, what is that? What is CLSK? That's something that I'm playing. I don't actually know what that company is. Clean Spark, a miner. Is another one that's been really, it came up on my filter of small caps because it's been doing really well in that option sentiment. So to me, I've got, something I can lean on, a few pieces of logic I can lean on as they relate to Donald Trump. And then I have net option sentiment matching up. So I normally say that because you can't see levered bets in cryptocurrency, and you can't, that I don't really like to bet on it. But this is something, especially in a market where I'm less sure. Because one of the other things I always say about Bitcoin is I'd rather lean on something like net option sentiment, because I'm much more sure I can understand how to interpret a return on that in the short term. But this seems like by far the most reliable short term, investment to make right now. So I'm loading up on it pretty big.
So you mentioned how that's based off Donald Trump speaking tomorrow. Does that mean it's a shorter term trade idea for you, or is that something you could see yourself holding on to for the rest of 2024? How do you feel about the time frame
Um,
on it?
hey, if it goes, um, if it goes well, um, and I have a lot of profit, say in any of these positions, I might keep it running. I think I have, 4 in each right now. So yeah, I might close out some with profit. That's the nice thing about having a lot of positions. Typically, I'll only take one, so it gives you less options about how to handle it. But yeah, like I would see no reason why I wouldn't let something ride.
So I did want to just get to that point that you made when you started speaking, because it's a big change from like how the crypto you felt about it seemingly on recent streams. So I wanted to get to that first. If we could cover, the tech pullback we're seeing today, uh, why it's reacting like that so much based off the earnings. Obviously, you said Google wasn't that bad, so maybe it's Tesla. Also, another one was Visa missed their revenues, which maybe is also spooking the market since they are maybe the best gauge on the economy since they, all the spending that they cover. Um, so, how do you feel about, I guess Tesla and Visa more so? We kind of talked about Google a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we could be seeing is, we talked about, in our newsletter this week, different scenarios, right? One of them was that tech was overvalued and that there would be a big correction. Another that there is like opportunistic shorters. So this could be, I think this speaks more to opportunistic shorters than tech is overvalued, because like there wasn't a big value miss, right? These valuations are made on these expectations. And if the expectations aren't missed significantly, obviously Tesla missed on profitability, but they beat on revenue. So that's a bit of a wash in terms of like how much is it going to affect the valuation. So I don't think we're necessarily seeing big valuation changes, but the more I think about it, the more I think that just like I think the chance that Donald Trump could say more things to move the market is probably going to make it very hard for people to stick in, and even like, in any circumstance, unless we basically see like big beats. I think more and more I'm now thinking we might get a bearish market until the election.
So we did have a
But tomorrow
question.
is going to be big for that, I'd add.
Mhm. We had a question from Sawspot, I think, before you got in here. You might have kind of covered this a bit before, like in our opening statement, but for those of us betting on tech longs, is now the time to just cut our losses and wait for volatility to subside? That's what they're asking.
Um, I mean, how long have you been holding those tech longs? I wouldn't think there would be losses. I hope you'd be cutting into gains, um, than losses with like this run that we've been on. Um, but either way, I mean, the one thing that I'm saying about SMCI, but I'll say, yeah, I got a specific one. The one thing that I'm saying about SMCI is that, let me check on that option sentiment. I've been, basically dumping since the news event. If you look at SMCI's net option sentiment, it's been in a bad trend. You know, anyone could have seen this coming. This is why I like cut most of my positions. As well as, hedged. Like the only way I was going to leave SMCI open, I have other chips, that I'm shorting. So, that was the only reason I was comfortable leaving one position. But on a long-term hold, like one of the things I shared in Seeking Alpha, like a Seeking Alpha piece that they say it's like a great long-term buy, it's a good long-term buy. Like if you want to do that, if you want to hang in, but you might see it go down another 20 or 30%. And if you want to hold and maybe buy more or reduce your position, if you're prepared to do that, you should. But net option sentiment is not suggesting, hasn't been in a good trend for it. And personally, what I'm looking at in that last SMCI position in the newsletter picks, basically, like I'm gonna give it a day to see if it like spins back and this was like an overcorrection. But if it opens red tomorrow, I'm out. That's how I'm looking.
So
And that's how I would look at like any, if you have a long portfolio, like, and that's it, and you're just buy and hold, then you shouldn't cut your losses. You should just hold. If you're trying to like trade this market, hedging would be good. Always like it's never a bad idea to reduce your position to buy lower or, decide to come back in with some of it as you see it turn around. But it's hard to say. Like we're saying, this is not really earnings driven. I think this is just a lot of market uncertainty.
So, pulling on that thread a bit further, I wanted to ask you, like, is this a fundamental change we've seen off the earnings? It sounds like not from you, but also talking about like, the Warren Buffett method of like when you see blood in the streets, that's the time where you should get greedy. Is there any? Obviously, you took advantage of the crypto setup you're seeing. Any of the big cap tech stocks look interesting? If you're a long-term investor, would you just say like this is kind of just noise and you should just maintain your long-term focus? Um, yeah, what do you think about that?
I don't like I'm saying, I think the next 2 months is not really the time to be adding, until maybe right before the next president takes office. But especially if that's Trump or wins, I think the market's going to respond positively and we might just see a choppy market or a bear market until then. So I don't think now is the time to enter. Unless like the thing that I always do and I will probably keep doing is own some tech but have short tech too to balance it out and maybe more short than long. If you're going long only, I don't think today is the day to buy more or
Mm-hmm.
maybe this week. I think we have to see how it works out a little more.
And one thing I did wanted to mention, I feel like we don't talk about technicals much on the stream, uh, but the QQQ did cross below its 50-day moving average, which I believe is seen to be pretty bearish. Do you think that's important that that happened and, um, a sign that we could continue to see weakness? I mean, it sounds like you're saying volatility, you think it could continue from it.
Yeah, it went below there, but I think the RSI is like to give another thing. I thought someone I remember seeing the RSI. That's very small. Oh no, it's at 48.50. That's not bad, but I mean, it's definitely out of the overbought zone that it was in. Yeah, I mean, the tough thing is, you know, if something's earnings driven, I think this is kind of more like news market fear driven. And that's how we really saw it start with, something Trump said, and then, a crowd. So it's like you have to deal with these things differently. If there's like no major like events, it's just earnings and things are going below their EMAs. I think you have to take that into account a lot more than if it's a news driven thing.
So we are in a period of seasonal weakness for the market between middle of July through September. Historically, is typically the weakest based on historical performance. Do you think that could kind of play a role in how you were saying like there's opportunistic shorts? Maybe they're just kind of factoring all that stuff in. And then also, if you could explain why like this is typically the weakest period, because I feel like with such a historical uh, you know amount of data of it happening, there has to be like some kind of specific reason that now would be like typically weak.
I think it's just um I think it's just basically there's a cyclical nature to any like to a lot of a lot of businesses. Um, and I mean, you can also argue that like going into elections, this is, is a strong period. So I think often you can say more things than one. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think, part of the reason is that there's lower volumes in the summers. And when there's lower volumes, it's opportunities for shorters, right? When you short something, it's about controlling, putting more selling pressure than buying pressure. And typically in markets, markets go up a lot more than they go down. There's just more buying pressure. So it's riskier to start a short campaign. But, if there's less volume, less buying pressure, I would say all summer is really like the best opportunity as a shorter to act. And I think that's why that's why you get that kind of behavior.
Comment from Adam Mutseb. He is betting on Coinbase and Bitcoin with you.
Yeah,
Um,
I did one more on this call. My strategy is like when I see these crests, like basically, and I'm going to do this more leading up to it. I did exit one. I wish I had exit more of them. I want to just kind of like I've been watching and kind of when I see it bottom out, I enter one and then I'm going to kind of exit, try to like clip some gains as I lead into the main trade. That's my plan. But yeah, it looks like Bitcoin is going up again. So it looks like that was maybe a good spot to add. But yeah, this is a big bet on on uh on this event that
I
I'm
was go-
making. But
I was oops,
yeah,
sorry.
I never really do that many positions. But and there's no way to hedge, unless I guess I could like add like a Bitcoin short, but that doesn't, that's kind of just like betting against myself. Um, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say you said before you had like four positions of I think CLSK. That's more than I typically see you hold. So do you have a high level of confidence that on this setup?
It's relative. Like if I think I had more confidence in other trades, you wouldn't see just like an extreme allocation, but it's more of a function of this being like by far the best idea that I
Hmm.
see in the market right now. And we did talk about this earlier in the week and ask if it was like a buy on the rumor, sell on the news thing. But it's just like I was thinking about that a lot this week, and I'm not sure it really applies because how many people really know what the news is going to be on this? I think, and I do think Trump is going to want to say I have a hard time seeing a scenario where Trump says something that's very good for Bitcoin longer term and it going down. I just have a hard time wrapping my head around that idea, just because I think a lot of people are going to be watching, listening, whatever. And it's just like, I think, especially in cryptocurrencies, everyday people move them a lot more. There's definitely whales in it. But I just think at the end of the day, people will want to play, even institutions will want to play a positive reaction to Trump saying positive things about Bitcoin. And hey, there's rumors Kamala Harris, I think it would go up, like seeing that, I think it would go up just on her announcing it.
Hmm.
And talk about a really good thing for it is the other thing I'm thinking about. Like if they're both there and they're basically just like using that conference to compete for young voters, like I feel like they're both going to say, one might say something more positive than the next.
Yeah, when I was reading about it, the number I saw was there's 50 million crypto holders, I guess, in the U.S. So it's almost like they don't have a choice but to be positive on it. They don't want to, alienate those voters. But one of
Uh,
the pieces
and
of
like,
new,
what's the point of showing up if you're going to be like tepid, you
yeah,
know?
well, one of the pieces of news I saw that they were saying Trump might say he'll put Bitcoin on the U.S.'s balance sheet, which I hope the market's not pricing that in, because then if he doesn't say it, that'd be bearish. But if he does say that, I feel like that's going to be a big shift in the perception of crypto and Bitcoin.
That's what I've heard, and that's what I'm saying. Even if some whales are betting on that being said, like I just can't see a scenario in which everyday people are going to hear that and not rush to buy.
Mhm.
And then if that's happening, like, are people really going to be dumping? Like, they might be dumping. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't want to get greedy if it happens. I think it could end quickly, and I'm going to be cognizant of that. But I just have a hard time not seeing it rip after he says, like, I'm gonna put Bitcoin on the balance sheet.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be a pretty it'd probably go down as a historic day in US history if, like, a presidential candidate says that. I mean, I can't wait to watch it. I don't know what time he's speaking. I have to find that out. If anybody in
Well,
our
here's
chat
an
knows.
interesting fact. Like, I've been talking to some of my, like, much more crypto knowledgeable people. Um, and like one of the things he told me that actually, like, blew me away is actually, like, because the laws around, you know, the securities laws around cryptocurrencies and like ICOs are very, like, not laid out. Um, 1,300 crypto, like, blockchain crypto companies that started in America have moved just to Switzerland. So, you know, there's the aspect of there's the aspect of uh him talking about it on the balance sheet being something that's interesting. And then there's the other aspect of um maybe he's going to say something friendly to businesses, figuring out like a tax break, like that brings more of them back to America, because like I know that's something that he's cognizant of.
Mhm. Very interesting stuff. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is like in this bloody market we're seeing today, which areas of the market do you think are still safe, and how is the market rotating? It's funny throughout the stream to see that crypto might be your number one like sector or area of the market, crypto-based stocks. Anything else that's you think has the best chance of going up versus the market?
I mean, not anything I'm super excited about, to be honest. Like, I'm more excited about shorting the market
Yeah, you
than.
said you were like had a bearish signal, right? In
Yeah,
Prospero. Yeah.
yeah. Um, that's what I'm more interested in, um, shorting than uh than anything else. Like, I think I want to start flipping the portfolios. I mean, I got to look one more day. That's what I always say. Like, you look one more day and you say, like, okay, is there at least a continuation? Because sometimes things come back strong after a loss. So I got to see that. I got to this sun coming out. I got to adjust the light a little bit.
Yeah. Um, so one of the stocks I wanted to bring up today that was a favorite in the Prospero signals earlier this year. I don't think it's been at the top for a bit now, probably rightly since it's dropped over 50% from when it peaked. Uh, it's Celsius. It went through a stock split, and like I said, it's been hit. Trying to pull it up right now. It's been hit very hard. Let me pull up how much it's dropped. So it peaked at over $96 per share, and right now it's sitting at $45 per share. Um, I hope none of our viewers held it through that peak to trough loss we saw there. Probably are feeling it right now. But I wanted to take a look at Celsius stock and ask you if it's time to buy that falling knife or just stay away for a little bit longer.
I mean, what's so interesting about here, let me just finish what I'm doing. I'm taking one more coin position as we're talking.
Coinbase, CLSK, are those the two primary crypto adjacent plays?
Yeah, those are the ones that are looking good in net option sentiment, and one's like kind of more of a small cap play. Um, and but yeah. Um, God, still looking. Gotta change this so much. Um, Sorry,
I
I'm
think
doing.
it's okay.
You think it's okay?
Yeah.
I look kind of like a ghost. Um, Sorry, what was the question one more time?
I was just bringing up Celsius because I noticed that it had dropped
Oh yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
much. Yeah.
So yeah, I had a good answer. Like the thing with Celsius, this ghost thing is really bothering me. I can't do it. Okay. No longer a ghost. Way better. Um, so yeah, I think a lot of people liked Celsius. Um, and it was like kind of one of those things that we talk about. You know, it gets social attention, and then that leads to more sales, which leads to, you know, stock performance and more social attention and really cycling up. And it was like way overvalued. If you looked at forward EPS, I think at one point it was like, I think I saw it at like, you know, 150 times 2024 earnings, something crazy high. Maybe it was 80. Don't quote me on that exact number, but it was crazy high, right? And so that's when, like, especially in this market, things can be interesting when that happens, where they kind of like catch fire, and you're just like, okay, maybe the earnings aren't there now, but you know, the better the stock does, the more people talking about it, the more attention the products will get, the better their sales. And we've talked about that with Abercrombie and Fitch. So, you know, when they're in that up cycle, it's exciting. But I'd say anytime something breaks, you got to avoid it. You got to prove that it gets into that up cycle again. Because right now it's like even still overvalued relative to earnings. And if there's no reason to like, if there's no buzz pulling it back up, it's you know, not interesting until then.
Interesting. One thing I wanted to ask you on the macro basis is, with the weakness in the market we're seeing, particularly today, is that going to affect the Fed's rate cutting path? Is it putting a lot of pressure on them to do it sooner? How do you think the market action we're seeing is going to affect the Fed?
I think it just came out today that said they were thinking about a rate cut. Like, yeah, so they're already responding. I think that like, and if we're talking about like the politics game around this, right? Like, if on one side it would help Trump to have the market perform poorly, it would obviously help now Harris to have it perform well. Although without her being the president, I'm not really sure like how much that's tied to her. But I think it being bad would just be not helpful. So yeah, it behooves everyone to like have the stock market as good as possible heading in. And it's a bit more of a race now. Like you see the polls, and Harris is already polling a lot closer to Trump than Biden was. So so I think they're going to pull out, you know, all the stops, whatever they can.
We are living in some weird times. When you were saying like it might not be the performance of the market might not be timed to her. I don't know the political situation. I think that is what's driving the volatility. If I had to guess, in the markets, is the whole political landscape is like you've never seen it before. It's so weird.
Yeah, I've never seen a presidential candidate move the market that much. It's crazy.
I guess because at that time it was like a given by the polls that he looked like he was going to be president. I don't know. You know what's interesting to
Yeah,
me,
but
based
even then, it's not really like we're in a new paradigm, and Trump does this more than anyone. With like direct communication with the voters, like normally there's not a lot of like, you know, I'm gonna do this kind of talk. Like normally there's like politicians make policies, you know, like the only thing you really see politicians say things about is like official responses to like international relations things, you know, that tends to be traditionally why politicians speak out. Like typically they'll like address the nation, and they'll say like a lot of really like, you know, generic things, or they'll make policy, right? So it is not like obviously Fed chair speaks, that moves the market, but typically like, you know, the president is not necessarily known as a market mover with, you know, what they say. Um but yeah, interesting times.
So before we started the stream, I had a feeling it'd be a little somber with all of the red we're seeing across the board today. So I wanted to end it on a good note in the topics section of our stream. Do you know Tom Lee George? Like based off?
Personally, no.
No. I just mean based off his.
I just kidding.
So he's from Fundstrat, and I first saw him when the market, I think back in 2022 when it was going down so much, and all of his bullish predictions. He's like a perma-bull. Uh, he's always bullish. So he went on this podcast and he made a bold prediction about Nvidia yesterday. He said that by the end of the decade, so 2030, they could have revenues that exceed $1 trillion. Now, it's tough on a day like this to even entertain that idea, but how do you feel about that? Do you think there's any possibility? What about that Tom Lee prediction? Could it come true?
I mean, it's a little big, but hey, they like I think the challenge and what I'm hearing more and more is there might start to be supply constraints. Like not only for some of the like raw materials that we saw in the supply chain, but also just like space to put servers. And there's ways around that, but like, it's definitely something that's way on the table. And they do so many smart things like, oh, we can't sell certain chips in countries. We'll just make new chips that comply with those standards. So like I wouldn't bet against Nvidia at all, but that seems like a pretty big number. I would say if any company gets to $1 trillion in revenue, they'd be the favorite for me. Probably followed by Microsoft after that, and Tesla after that.
No Amazon? That's what I was thinking in my head when you started naming other companies.
I think the thing with Amazon is like the three, like I'm betting on a few different things there. For Nvidia, it's obvious. For Microsoft, I'm betting on OpenAI just like being used everywhere and them starting to jack up the price, like Windows on steroids. And Tesla, I'm betting on robotics and self-driving cars. So I'm not sure. Like Amazon would probably be 4, but I'm not sure I see that. Like they're the safest. They have the highest floor of any company. Is how I'd look at it. They're just going to plod along, make more and more and more and more and more, and like there's very little risks to their business. All 3 of those companies I would consider have riskier downsides than Amazon by orders of magnitude. Amazon is by far the highest floor company. And I mean, I think they could do big things in healthcare. I think they could do big things in shipping, but like they're a low margin business, right? Whatever they do is kind of low margin. Both of what I said, like if they take over, if they do healthcare stuff, they do everything cheap, right? Like all 3 of those like high, those trillion things that I talked about, it's higher margin. And I guess we're talking about revenue, not profit. But instead of saying low margin, I should say low. A lot of what they're doing is not about what Amazon's doing is not necessarily that expensive compared to, a robot or a universally used AI. Because like some of the things that Microsoft, I think like, and I've said this before, I think the AI companies are going to start to like replace consultants. And those will be very, big ticket, big ticket things. I mean, but Amazon could be one of those. I think cloud could eventually become consulting. But they are, they are 4. I just like, yeah, I see those other ones as just like if it's going to be a number that big, you're basically catching something at huge upside.
It's funny. I know we got to do our switch over now, but like we got a comment based off what you said about Nvidia and having like raw material supply constraints. And it's funny, like there's, think of all the businesses out there in the world that have so many problems, and Nvidia's is like just trying to get the to extract the earth of the sheer like mass amount of materials they could, because they have no like demand problem whatsoever. So it's crazy.
Yeah, and I mean that's an interesting thing about like all the stuff that we're doing with China, because a lot of those raw materials, I don't know if we, I don't know how much we buy from China. I do know like China mines more than anyone, so it's an interesting. I mean, they obviously have a lot more territory, but that's an interesting relationship there, where we're being like, you can't buy our chips, but someday we need the raw materials.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think the time has come to do the model portfolio
All right.
update. So we'll see you on the other side in the Prospero laboratory. All of the viewers hang with me for a second while George does the switch over. And yeah, I didn't know if George was frozen or not there for a second. All right. Let me give you all an update on the markets. I was hoping maybe we'd see some bounce while we were speaking. Oh, and would you look at that? It looks like just in the last few minutes, the market is trying to give it a go. I mean, it went down all the way until 3:30, but we're only down 3.1% right now in the QQQ, which is less than when we started the stream. The SPY is down 2.01% right now, so it still could hold on to its streak of not dropping over 2%. That'll be interesting to watch the day close. I'm kind of hoping it does drop 2%, just so that stat doesn't live anymore, and we could be beyond that. Dow is down 1%. Let's take a look at the net option sentiments in Prospero. I was looking before, and QQQ was at like the low 20s, so it was looking pretty bearish. Okay, so the QQQ is at 13 right now, so that's just about the lowest I think I've ever seen it in our signals. Not looking good. Continue to have dropped throughout the day. It opened all the way up at 40, I believe, so big drop today. SPY is at 32. So the SPY has held on a bit better in net option sentiment than the QQQ. SPY opened at 43, so about a 10-point drop, but it's almost triple the QQQ now. I'll pose that to George and see what he thinks about that. Maybe people are going to be running from the hills from tech in the next several days. Let's check out some of the stocks he was mentioning as being most bullish on based off the crypto stuff we talked about. Coinbase is pinned at 100 in net option sentiment, 98 in upside breakout, 30 downside breakout. Looking pretty good. Not a lot of short pressure, but it does have a high dark pool rating of 83. But that 100 net option sentiment has basically been pinned at the top since July 15th. So maybe people are expecting this event even earlier than us. And now CLSK is an interesting looking stock. Net option sentiment is at 81. Dark pool is at 90. Growth and upside breakout combined to be over 160. So that's generally a pretty bullish signal. 83 in growth, 82 in upside, only a 16 downside breakout. So that's pretty interesting right there. Got a lot of viewers in here. Thank you for tuning into the stream so far. If you liked what we've talked about, give us a thumbs up. Good for the algorithms on Twitter and YouTube. And let us know if you're going to also be playing this crypto event that seems to have captured our attention. George, I just looked at the QQQ net option sentiment, and it's all the way down to 13. That is the lowest I think I've ever seen it.
Wow. I mean, I'm not going to move. Like I said, I held today, so I'm not going to do anything too nuts. I'm going to hang out a little bit and see what happens.
Now it's at 8.
Wow. Well, I think what that means is I'm going to short more tech.
Yeah, so the SPY is at 35, so it's holding up way better than the QQQ, at least in net options. But yeah, seeing QQQ in single digits, that's a new one for me.
I've seen it before, but yeah, it's. We're going to definitely be doing some tech shorts. Not like we don't want to get overloaded right before it turns around, but we'll see what's good in the signals. And I'm sharing my screen. All right. Let's check. Oh, where? I used to have like the links to the sector things in that. I'll have to find that again. Okay, yeah, tech just hammered. And consumer discretionary. That's so annoying because I opened up some consumer discretionary, like one of them. Okay.
Looks like tech, communications, and consumer discretionary shorts are the targets. Are the target for the bears. Looks like industrials as well. Don't think it's a good idea to add any bulls. LOL. I was surprised to see our tech AI proxy taking a beating.
We left one Tesla. We should have gotten rid of all of them yesterday. All right. HubSpot's doing okay. Fang's doing okay. We'll leave those other ones alone. Okay, we're just gonna leave that alone. Oh. Getting rid of some shorts. We're gonna have to add more. Oh, it's a very spread out. Oh, great. Looks like we picked one. All right. Now we're not entering any longs, but we're going to enter. Okay. I think we want to do greater than maybe. Just avoid small caps in case it's still revenge of the small caps. And then we're going to do the sectors we target, technology, consumer cyclical communications, and there's industrials. All right, let's see what we got. ENR. Go in the opposite direction again. I'm checking out that. It sucks to invest in to be watching crypto because it runs all the time.
Yeah, you were saying the stock market is volatile. Crypto is another level.
Damn. This has been here for a while. All right, let's look at like the 30-minute. Yeah, I might want to just check on that tomorrow. It's such a big hit. Stericycle's doing fine. Oh, Whirlpool is something I thought about adding this morning. Oh, God, of course. Of course, one of the ones that would have been good to add, you didn't. I love that F-Wonk. It's a great name for a company. Oh, that's a different. I'm already short of Liberty Media. I think I added that this morning. All right, I think I'm feeling pretty good about AVT. Don't want to overdo it. We'll do AVT as well. Okay, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And I got 6 here. John Bean Technologies. All right, John Bean. Okay, I think that's everything. Where's QQQ net option sentiment?
QQQ is at 7.
How about SPY?
SPY is 35.
All right, it's 3:58. I'm going to check on all the stuff. Seeing it. Almost the buzzer to get us out.
You know, I'm thinking now, I remember when the markets were super bad in like 2020 and even 2022. Isn't there like limit down days where if like the markets are all down over, it's like 3 or 3.5%, it like pauses?
I don't like recall that, but could be.
Let me see if I can find that quick. Yeah, it's called a circuit breaker, but it's more than I said. It's 7%.
Got it. All right. I'm sending this. Any more questions?
I don't see any more questions in our chat.
All right.
Hopefully our viewers, watching the stream, you're able to get a better understanding of what's happening, and we'll be back Monday, hopefully with more green on the screen, right, George?
Hopefully, yeah. All right. Have a great rest of the day, everyone.
You too. See everybody.